Hi, this is Connor again speaking about prophecy. And today we're going to talk about tongues, which is related to prophecy, in case you're wondering. They're very related, in fact. I would say one without the other probably is not going to work very well. So, tongues. Now, there are three types of tongues. There is the tongues found in Acts 2, verses 1 to 13, where the disciples, filled with the Spirit, suddenly start speaking in a language they'd never learned, languages from the Middle East at that time. And so they were speaking these languages, and the people that were in Jerusalem at the time for the Passover from all over the Middle East and all over the then known world recognized these guys were speaking their language, and they were speaking it more or less perfectly. And that is no small feat. No, in fact, that's a miracle. For them to be speaking it in such a way they could easily understand what they were saying and know exactly what they were saying, they would have had to have the grammar, the words right, the word order right, and the pronunciation right, which is no small feat. Learning a language, I'm learning some Spanish, and believe me, it's not an easy thing, but for them to do it spontaneously and to get everything correct in so many different languages, that is miraculous. Now, as to whether or not that's happened again, to be fair, there's no clear record in the scriptures, but it doesn't mean it hasn't happened again, and there's probably an implication in 1 Corinthians 14 of that possibility. However, I can testify in my lifetime I've seen it happen twice, and I've heard other stories, but I'm just going to relate the stories that I personally know of. The first one's a guy that I know. He's a pastor, a very good guy, but strictly monolistic. The man does not speak another word of another language. He might have occasionally used a Greek word when he was preaching, but believe me, the man is strictly monolistic. So he was at a meeting, this was some years ago, and they were all speaking in tongues. And after the meeting, a guy beside him or in front of him, I can't quite recall, said to him, "Do you speak modern Hebrew?" And he said, "No, I don't." And believe me, he doesn't. So he said, "Well, you were just praising God in perfect modern Hebrew." So the tense correct words, correct order, correct pronunciation. Incredible. And he wasn't even aware that he was doing it. I had a similar experience. I was in Indonesia many years ago, and I was in a cell group. And after the cell group, we were speaking tongues in the cell group, and after the cell group, a woman said to me, "Do you speak Indonesian?" I said, "Well, I was here many years ago. I used to speak a little bit, but I certainly wasn't fluent." She said, "Well, you were just speaking fluent Indonesia, the praises of God." So my word order, pronunciation, grammar, all those things were correct, but I wasn't even aware of it. So there's that sort of tongues where by the Spirit of God you're given the ability to speak a language that's of this world, you might say. The second type is the one that's probably more controversial because it's not so black and white, I would say. And this is what we call the heavenly language. We call it the heavenly language because it comes from heaven itself. And it's found again in 1 Corinthians 14, verse 2, and then verse 13. But it talks about how you speak this language that no man understands. You speak in mysteries. So for the mystics, those people who want to be mystical, speak in tongues. And this is a language, Paul says, that when you're speaking in tongues, it's your spirit praying, but your mind is not fruitful. In other words, your mind has no idea what you're saying. But it is the language of the Spirit. And when you do that, you actually build up your spirit, you edify and you build yourself up. So it's very, very important. I would question those who are negative about this. Why would you not want something to build you up? Now, to be clear, it doesn't build up your mind. It doesn't build up your soul or your body. It builds up your spirit. The overflow might affect those other areas, but that's what it does. And this language has no translation, which brings me to the next one. So so now, by the way, before I forget, this language is really good in prayer intercession, and it's a very powerful language. And I would encourage you to speak it In fact, Paul said, I would that you all speak in tongues. I speak in tongues more than all of you, but I wish that you all spoke in tongues. And for those that despise it, he said, do not forbid the speaking in tongues. Now this brings us to the next one, which also is clearly a challenge for many, many people, including the Pentecostal churches, which I'm part of. And that is tongues and then the interpretation. Now this is where you're in a service, there's a lull, and then someone speaks out loud their heavenly language, speaks it out loud. And then the idea is someone should interpret it, or the person himself who did it should be able to bring an interpretation of that. Now, Paul gives a lot of instruction about this. It's not sort of the wild west of Pentecostalism. He gives some pretty clear instructions. One of which he said, if there's no one to interpret and you can't interpret, don't do it. Now, unfortunately, I think that's kind of been used, and there's just, in my whole time in the Pentecostal churches, I've seen it twice in service, twice only. And it just seems to be that people shy away from it because it's in a too hard basket for a variety of other reasons. I'm not sure exactly why. But it's a gift that God's given us. So we shouldn't despise it. And hence Paul says, don't forbid the speaking in tongues. It's a good gift. And I would encourage us to, let's use it again. So those are the three uses, or the three different types of use of tongues. How does that relate to prophecy? Well, when you're speaking your heavenly language, as we call it, it's because it's nothing to do with your mind or reasoning. You're entering into the realm of the Spirit. It's the realm of the heavenly realm. And there is no logic and there is no rationale to it. And this is what trips a lot of people up. But it is powerful. And so prophecy, if you're going to prophesy, you also have to be able to move in this realm of the Spirit, where there is no rationale per se, so that you end up speaking about things you really do not know about, because you're speaking in the realm of the Spirit, and you're speaking about things that the Spirit reveals to you. And so therefore you have to be willing to take a step of faith. Prophecy requires faith, as do tongues. You've got to take a step of faith. What do we mean by a step of faith? A lot of people go, well, you take a step of faith, what does that mean? It's a valid question. It means you just give it a go. Simple as that, give it a go. And if it goes wrong, don't worry about it. Get up and try again. So I would encourage you, speak in tongues. It edifies you, and that edification of your spirit, building up your spirit, leads to an overflow. So via prophecy, you can build up other people's spirit. You see, our God is a builder. He edifies, encourages, and comforts people, and exhorts people. He's an exhorter, unlike the enemy, who is a destroyer of people. He's building us up so that we are more like Christ. The enemy wants to destroy you so you're more like his diabolical self. So I would encourage you to speak in tongues. And for those, I've heard some very, very extreme characterizations of tongues. One I heard about when I had a taxi service down in a little town in the middle of New Zealand. This lady, she was in my taxi. She was a semi-regular customer. So she knew I was the pastor of a church. And she said, oh, do you guys speak in tongues? I said, we do, but it's not the main emphasis. But she said, well, my parents' church, my parents believe that when you speak in tongues, it's of the devil. And she had drunk a little bit too much of the fruit of the vine, so I wasn't going to get into a discussion with her. And, it's something it's not worth doing. The sad thing was, every time I picked up this woman, she was a little bit tiddly. And the very thing that she despised may well have been the thing that had brought freedom to her. Anyway, all right. So speak in tongues. Give it a shot. Now, it's not a forced thing. Let the Spirit of God fill you and overflow with tongues. But I would encourage you, speak in tongues. Keep away from the naysayers. Keep away from it, because they're not going to help you. Speak in tongues. It's really important. It's good for you. Okay, thanks for listening. I hope this was helpful to you. And now you're supposed to say subscribe. Well, I don't want to go subscribe. But if you do, I'm going to promise you a reward. This is a promise. You can hold me to it. If you subscribe, if I meet you in person, if there's a shop nearby, and if I have the time, I eventually will buy you a little chocolate. Not a chocolate bar, because, well, I'm concerned for your health. I don't want you to indulge in something that might be too bad for you. But I'll buy you a chocolate. Or if you can't eat chocolate, maybe a grape or an apple or something, okay? So if you subscribe and I bump into you, you can hold me to that promise. But if you don't want to subscribe, that's all cool as well. I hope you get something out of it. I hope you can move on to other areas of prophecy and develop in that gift. Okay, thanks for listening. Bless you and your family. In Jesus' name, amen.